Hello there, I'm Rebecca Adlard and thank you for joining me in this presentation on motivating young learners. As you can see, I've called this In Young Learners' Shoes. The idea being that there are lots of ways we can motivate young learners, but first of all we need to understand how it feels to be a young learner and how that can help us to motivate them in their learning of English. So, the first thing with motivation is to remember that there are two types, the intrinsic and the extrinsic. And as an example, have a look at this person, this boy learning a musical instrument. Why is he learning the musical instrument? Maybe you've learnt a musical instrument. Was it because your parents bought you lessons? A teacher expected you to learn a new song, a new note for the next class? Maybe you were doing exams, music exams, or putting on a musical show. These are all really good motivational tools for learning a musical instrument, but they're all extrinsic. They are produced by other people for us and we want to achieve. And with extrinsic motivation, what we want is reward, praise, or a certificate that says we've achieved. And that's really key to remember. But what about intrinsic motivation? If I'm learning a musical instrument, the intrinsic motivation comes when I pick up that instrument and play because I enjoy it, because I really love playing the music. And that is also key with young learners. In general, we want to develop the intrinsic motivation, the love of learning English, and help them to be super motivated as they progress through life. So let's keep those in mind as we go on through our journey into motivation. Just to help you, I've called this DAPS. So we're looking at four main areas: dynamic, the atmosphere we create, how we plan for motivation, and how we support motivation in the classroom. And then I've called these dogs, apes, profs, or professors, and swords. So let's look a little bit more at dogs. Oh, there's the sword. Let's have a look at dogs. Dogs are dynamic. Dogs are energetic. And so are young learners. Young learners like to be doing rather than sitting. They want to be active rather than passive. They need stimulation and they have very short attention spans. So to keep them motivated, your classroom needs to be fun, it needs to be energetic, it needs to have pace and variety of activities. So think about the things your young learners love to do. They love songs, stories, chants, rhymes. They like doing TPR activities where they have to move to respond to language. They like a lot of games. They respond well to multimedia, to use of internet, to use of video, film where appropriate, and music. So trying to bring all of that into the classroom is really key for our young learners. And actually, this builds on their intrinsic motivation, because if they enjoy the activity they are doing, they are happy to learn and it keeps them motivated. But let's have a look at an actual activity. So we use songs, we know our young learners love songs, but if we do the same thing every time we play a song, then perhaps that becomes less motivating, because surprise can be good, variety can be good. Let's take this song here. As you can see, we've got a nice visual of some crazy monsters and we're describing them in this activity. So the first time that I play this song for my young learners, I'm probably going to get them to listen and then to find the monsters. So let's have a listen.
The monster is sad. Sad, sad, sad. The monster is sad. Boo hoo hoo.
Okay, so that first monster is sad. So of course I'm going to ask my learners, look at the pictures. Can you find the sad monster? Okay. Then the next time, I'm going to use a little bit of TPR in this activity. I'm going to ask them to mime a bit. So when we get to the word that describes the monster, I'm going to ask them to do the actions with me. So let's have a look at that. Here he comes.
The monster is sad. Sad, sad, sad. The monster is sad. Boo hoo hoo.
Okay. So they're beginning to understand, to listen quite carefully. So let's challenge them a little bit. Let's see if they can actually give us the next words and they can complete the song themselves. So this time I'm going to play the song and I'm going to pause before a key word and allow my learners to try and put the word in its place. And you can do this in spoken dialogues, in songs, in rhymes. Pause and wait for a response, wait for an answer. So let's have a look. Let's listen.
The monster is
sad, and allow them to fill that gap and then
sad.
Show them.
Sad,
Yes.
sad,
Well done.
sad. The monster is sad.
Boo
hoo
hoo. Okay, so they're beginning to interact with the song and find they've got the language. So this time, what about if I just play the music? Can they give me even more of the song? Let's challenge them. So if we go back and I just say, here's the music. What is the words? The monster is sad. Well done. And start to build their confidence and change the way that you're working with the song. Another thing you can do to challenge them is to ask them if they can create another verse. Can they draw their own monster? And then can they make a verse to describe that monster? Can you record it? Can we video them? Can we share that with the rest of the class, other people in the school, parents and carers at home? All of these are ways to motivate our learners and let them take a bit of control over what they're doing. And that's going to really help them to intrinsically enjoy the activity and also to extrinsically want to impress and please and show how good they are. Why not challenge them to teach that song to a parent or carer or a brother or sister at home, or even the key words, and make that their little challenge. And then don't forget that when they come back, the next lesson, the next week, the end of the unit, to refer back. Did you teach them? Was it easy? Was it difficult? Were they good? Were you better? Etc. Challenge is always good. Challenge is a motivating tool for us as teachers. But remember that challenge has to be not easy, but not unreachable. It's got to be something I can do if I try. Let's have a look then. Songs we know are motivational. What about something that perhaps learners find a little bit less inspiring? Something like a reading comprehension. Often when we do a reading comprehension, it's what I call a heads down activity. Learners are focusing downwards, often individually, sometimes working with a partner, and they're very led by what they see on the page. So here, they've got 3 questions they need to answer and a text they're going to find the answers in. perfectly lovely activity. But if every time I do a reading comprehension, this is the structure I use, then maybe that's not so motivating, especially for learners who maybe have a slower reading rate, maybe are struggling with the language a little bit more. So let's have a look at some ways we can make this different, vary the pace, make it more dynamic. How about a reading relay race? Put your students into teams. You can mix those abilities to make it much fairer. If you want to change the dynamics in the room, you can separate friendships, make them work with people they don't normally work with. You can choose. It's a competition. Competition generally for young learners is quite motivating. They want to win. Take your reading text, photocopy it, and then place it somewhere in your room that's away from most of your teams. If you can, outside the classroom is perfect. Then in your teams, everyone needs a number, 1 to 4 or 5. And each team needs a piece of paper and a pen. The rules. The first person in the team, number 1, is going to run to the text, read the first word, the first line, whatever they can remember, run back to their team, and number 2, who has the pen and the paper, is going to write down what number 1 tells them, and only what number 1 tells them. When number 1 has finished and number 2 has written, then number 2 can get up and run to find the next word or line or phrase. They can run back, and then number 3, who now has the pen, writes that line. And so it continues, changing the runner, changing the writer, until they think they've completed the text. Once they think they've completed the text, you come over and you look through. Now you can decide whether you're going to allow some mistakes. Are you going to allow some spelling mistakes, some punctuation mistakes, maybe missing words, or are you going to say no, it needs to be perfect? In which case you can say there are 5 mistakes, 5 errors, and then they need to start again. One person runs out to see and check where they've made mistakes until they've got it as perfect as you want it to be. Maybe you'll let them have 1 mistake today, or 2, or gradually fewer and fewer. And the first team who gets it all correct wins. And this is a really nice movement. They're moving, they're talking, they're collaborating, they're working on something together. And all the time, they're reading that text again and again and again, but they don't mind. And once they've got those texts sorted, then they can answer the question in those groups, and you've got a nice group dynamic working together. So that's one way. Another way, if you want a less competitive game, perhaps, would be to photocopy this text and then cut it into 3 sections. Make sure you've got enough for 1 section per student and that they'll create complete texts. So if you've got 30 in the class, you can do 10 lots of 3. Then you give each student a card with a sentence or part of the text, and they stand up, they move around the room reading what's on their card to each other, trying to find people that complete their text. And when they've found the people and they have a complete text between them, then they can sit down. Again, what you've done here is you've given them a moving activity that's all about reading and listening. You've changed the group dynamics, so now they're probably working with people they don't always work with, and you've focused them on the task. And now they can answer the questions that you want them to answer together. And what about challenge? If you want to challenge them in this reading, then why not remove some of the key words? And then in their groups, ask them to think really carefully about what words might fit in those spaces. So for example, with this snake catcher text, I might remove job, work, exotic, for example, and then bring the class together and have a discussion about their suggestions. And that way, you've started to do a nice bit of work on the actual language, which is quite hard to motivate learners to do. So there's just some ways that we can keep activities dynamic, change them up, let students work together to sort problems and keep them motivated and keep them on their toes. Okay, so what about ownership? Dogs, if we think about dynamic dogs, are very territorial. They love their homes. They love to go out for a walk and be elsewhere, and then they come home and they're just as excited. Young learners are similar in that they feel motivated if they feel ownership over their learning space. So how can we achieve that? Make them feel that this classroom is not just yours, but it is theirs too. And this can be as simple as displays of their work on the walls. It can be as simple as letting them decorate a name tag on their desk. But also, give them ownership by giving them some responsibility in the classroom. Use classroom helpers to encourage very young learners to feel part of the process of learning. So they're not just being told what to do all the time. Make being a classroom helper a privilege, not a chore. Use a rota system and explain that if you are disruptive, then maybe you won't get to be a classroom helper because I need my best people as classroom helpers. And then give your classroom helpers some responsibility of ownership. When you're going to do an activity, for example, a song, why don't you say to your classroom helpers, what do you think? Shall we stand up and sing or shall we sit down and sing today? It doesn't matter which one they choose particularly, and you can even change it. You can start doing one thing and then change, but they feel that they've had input. Maybe you could ask them, do you think we should do a song or a game now? What would you like to do? And they can choose. And you know you're reviewing animals. It doesn't matter if you do it through a song or a game. And they've made that choice, and choice is really motivating. Let them help you decide on what to put on a display, how to arrange things. Let them have some ownership of their learning environment as well as their learning. Grounded. What do I mean by grounded? It seems almost the opposite of dynamic, but young learners need moments where they feel safe and secure. And what they need is to know why they're doing something. So take time to explain the purpose of activities. We're going to look at the animals again, for example. This is a good example of something that is quite motivational for older, slightly older young learners. Grammar is not the most motivating topic for young learners. So how can we help them? Well, if you look at this, the very first instruction actually doesn't tell them what the grammar is, which is the verb to be. It tells them the purpose. Why are we doing this? We're doing this so that we can describe people and objects. And then let's have a look at that in action. Let's look at a cartoon that's quite interesting and fun. Let's see how these characters are actually using this language. And then let's think if we want to use it in the same way. Who are they describing? What objects are they describing? Do you have those objects? Do you know these people? What's your name of your best friend? And then lead them to the grammar and say, this is your toolkit. This is how you can do this. And then they know why. And if you look at exercise 2 here, you'll see that then we've said, go on then, have a go. So that's quite a nice way of showing them there is a purpose behind it, and this will build their intrinsic motivation. I'm not learning the verb to be because I've been told to. I'm learning it so that I can communicate and understand. And that's really, really key. Sizzlers and settlers. It's very important with young learners to have variety of pace in your classroom. Too many activities that are up and fun and moving they'll love, but they can get very carried away, as we all know. So these activities that I call sizzlers are really good for making them love your classes, have fun, engage with the learning. But sometimes they also need those settler activities that are calmer, more focused, and allow more thinking time. So it's very important when you want to do an activity that you consider, how could I do it as a sizzler and how could I do it as a settler? For example, I want to review colours with my very young learners. So for a sizzler activity, I might put different coloured objects around the room, call out a colour, and have my young learners run to that colour. And I'll move them around the room, checking they've understood the colour words. Another alternative sizzler, I might have the flashcards around the room, and then I might play some music, allow my learners to choose a colour and stand next to it, pause my music or get my classroom helper to pause, and then without looking say yellow, and anyone who is with yellow is out of the round, and I'll continue getting them to move, getting them to play. These are sizzlers. They're moving, it's dynamic, there's music going on. But what if I think my class needs a settler for colour, reviewing colours? Maybe I want them all sat on the carpet, eyes on me. So maybe instead I will take a colour flashcard, put it above my head and guess, is it yellow? No. Is it red? No. Is it green? Yes, it's green. Or maybe I'll put a sequence of colour flashcards on the board and have them repeat and then keep taking one away so that they're having to say the colour words, remembering what was there. And these are much more settling, focusing activities. So very important to be able to pull out of your bag a sizzler or a settler for the same purposes. Okay, so atmosphere, our little monkeys. One of the most motivational things for young learners is to walk into that classroom, feel safe and feel happy and feel in control of the atmosphere. And that's our job, is to create a nice, fun and relaxed atmosphere for those learners. It begins with a welcoming smile when they come in, using their names, asking them, how are you? And encouraging them to do the same with each other, and encouraging pair work and group work and games so that everyone feels comfortable in the space they're in. And then let's move on to the idea of projects as a psychological space. Once learners feel happy and comfortable in the classroom, think about the use of project work. Projects allow children a psychological space where they can make choices, where they can personalise, where they can respond to a topic personally, where they are asked to give opinions, they're challenged to find facts, and they're a really good tool for getting students to work in different groups, with pairs on their own, in bigger groups. So for example, we can start at a very low level. If you look at the project here, find or take a photo of you doing sports. It's personal, it's relatively easy, it's a physical thing to find or take a photo. It links to a child's own interests and they get to choose, and choice is really motivating. All you're asking them to do is make a quick poster and to maybe try and write some information. They may need to go and research that, they may already know. And then you're asking them to present it. So we're valuing what they're doing. So projects can be really motivating. But then also remember, projects can be a great way for students to work in pairs or in larger groups, as we've got here with the Summer House and the My Superhero. And this is important, particularly as they get older, because they need to learn how to work with others. There are very key skills that they need to be able to display as young adults. And project work is one of the key ways of motivating them to develop those skills. So try using a cooperative learning technique where you set up a project and each person in that group has a very fixed role that is vital to the project. They may be choosing the research method and doing the research. They may be finding the materials and choosing how the presentation will be delivered. Will it be a video or a book or a PowerPoint presentation or a poster? Or are they physically building and crafting something? Then someone might be writing the speech that they're going to deliver as part of their presentation. Another person might be the voice, the face who delivers it. But they've all got their key roles, and only by working together can they produce a decent presentation. And that's their extrinsic motivation. They want to succeed and they want to look good in front of their classmates, their teacher. Perhaps if you're going to post on your social media for your school, to parents and carers as well. So project work is really key, and it's something that we sometimes feel we don't have time for in classes, but try and think, where within a unit of work could I encourage a project for them to do? And enjoyment. At the end of the day, no one enjoys anything 100%, and learners and teachers have good days and bad days, and that's fine. But do look for the things that your learners and you enjoy doing in your classroom, and just try to integrate those as much as possible and as often as possible to motivate them. Okay, plan it, prof, or plan it, professor. It's vital for motivating learners that you've planned your lessons really well. And this means looking at a lot of different factors. It's really vital that you know what the learning objective is, and that that is different from your teaching objective. What are they learning, and how can I support them in this? And then really key as well, and think of variety within your lessons, within your units, is your focus. Are they all looking at me? Are they working on their own? Are they working with a partner, in groups? Are they heads down or heads up? How long are my activities? What's the pace? How varied is my pace? And then, do you have enough activities to fill the lesson? It's awful and demotivating if you let an activity run on because there isn't another one. Have some games, have some ways of extending activities. Can you personalise? Can you have a discussion about the topic? What can you do to motivate learners to keep thinking and keep doing? Make sure they are actively engaged at all times in activities. Keep your teacher talk and your teacher presentation to a minimum. Allow them to take control of their learning and of the classroom. Errors and questions. Is there space for you to identify errors? And is there space for learners to ask questions? It's very demotivating if you are never asked your opinion and you are never helped with your errors. How much sharing, how much autonomy do learners have? How much choice and how much challenge? and be really aware that these are key motivational tools for you. And then your backup activities. As I said, you need to know, can I do this as a sizzler or a settler? Can I get to the end of my lesson and think, I'm going to read a story, but no, my children actually need to do something a little bit more active and engaging. Maybe we can act something out. What are your backup activities? Those are just points to consider. And remember that all children at the end of the day need to know that you are on it, that there's nothing that's going to surprise you in this lesson. It's like getting on a plane and having super confidence in your pilot. That's what they need in you. And part of that is establishing rules and routines that help them to know where they are, what's happening, what they're meant to be doing. And that's your expectation of them. So for example, we know that songs can be great for identifying what's happening now, what stage are we at. So for example,
Listen to me, it's table time, it's table time. 1, 2, 3.
Short, to the point, repeating what they're meant to be doing. And when you've played this several times and practiced, then learners immediately know, I need to be at my table. So think about incorporating as many of these as you need to keep the flow of the lesson, to stop you shouting all the time or giving instructions, that you can just play a simple song or make a sound. You could use a bell, a triangle, a drum, something they'll identify that helps you to run the classroom without disrupting your activities and your flow and taking up your time. You could use a prop. For example, if it's a story time, you could have a special story hat that you put on to show them, oh, it's time for the story. We need to be on the carpet, ready to listen. You could have visual clues. It could be as simple as a picture of a book, and they know when they see the picture, it's time. But these routines are really, really important for them. It gives them a sense of security in the classroom. And without it, it can give a sense of chaos, which is very demotivating. And linked to this is the idea of order. We've talked about tell them what they are expected to do within an activity. Why are we doing it? But also just share with them what your lesson plan is. What are we doing today? Because otherwise they're floating in this range of activities that they may not understand why, when, where they're doing them. So it's quite important to maybe look at the icons on the book that you're using today. Look, we're going to look with our eyes, listen with our ears. There's a song icon, and then we're going to speak. And that might be enough to show them where the lesson's going and what you're expecting them to do. You could, with older students, have a sneaky peek at the unit, which means just flicking through and saying, oh, look, there's a reading and a bit of grammar and a listening. And again, they're identifying the steps and the stages of the day's lesson. With younger children, you could look at having a visual lesson plan. This is a kind of visual day plan for them, but you can do a similar thing. And then you can set up the cards that show them what they're doing. Here we do activity time, then circle time, then snack time, then wiggle time, etc. And as they move through, they'll see what they're doing and what's coming next, and also how close they are to finishing. And whilst we don't want them to race through, that's really helpful and motivating to set where they are in the lesson. So think about sharing that lesson plan with them. And then always be flexible. You have a brilliant lesson plan. You worked really hard. You're using a great course book that's had lots of author and editor input. and has a brilliant flow to a lesson. But sometimes students just can't focus. People are people, the lesson's not going well. Have those sizzlers and settlers, have alternative ways of presenting and practicing the language, of doing the song, of doing the story. Find the different ways that you could change and adapt to suit what's going on in the classroom on that particular day, in that particular lesson. So we come to a kind of overview, your sword of power, your motivating tool for these learners. Provide support. Support them with opportunities to learn, opportunities to make mistakes, because that's part of learning. Support them with their atmosphere, with interesting, dynamic activities. And always praise effort. Yes, we want our learners to achieve, but effort is what counts, and that's what motivates them when they know what they've done is good enough. They've tried and you've seen that. So value them, show them what their worth is. They can have star stickers for trying really hard at an activity. They can have a star of the week that you send home to parents. This child was amazing this week, and I'll tell you why. They can have star charts on the board, on your walls, stickers for each time they do brilliant things. Allow them to really build their self-esteem, display their work, share their work, comment on each other's work, give them time to look around and say, wow, let's look at Anna's work. Isn't that amazing? Because, So really find the opportunities to praise and to build self-esteem. And that's going to build all their motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic. Give them opportunities to make mistakes, but don't overcorrect them either. That can be very demotivating. Just find a way to role model the correct way of doing it, or think next week I need to come back and do this activity again because they still haven't got it quite right, but they tried, and that's what I'm really interested in. Use rewards. Yes, it's extrinsic motivation, but use them, show them that it works. Give them, for example, a jar in the classroom, and every time the class or an individual child does something brilliant, put a chestnut in it and tell them when that jar is full, we're going to have a pizza party, or we're going to watch a film, or something that's just a bit different and it acts as a reward, and motivate them as a class to work together to fill that jar. Can they fill that jar? How long will it take them? Of course, at the end of the day, you can choose. If you know at the end of a term you're going to give them that party, that reward, then you know you're going to fill the conker jar to the top by then. And you can judge that. But they will feel motivation, excitement. You could let them plan the party and the reward. Very motivating. So think of these ideas. And then just make sure at the end of the day you're showing them how well they're doing. Don't ever rely on just your stronger students in your class, but encourage your weaker students as well. Support them in doing the best they can do. And part of this, one of the key ways of doing this, is when you're asking for volunteers or asking for answers, just make sure it's a level playing field for everyone. Don't choose students, randomly choose them. Take lollipop sticks or pieces of paper, write their names on them, and just pull one out. And that's the person who's going to model the activity with you, or is going to answer a question or give an opinion. And that helps to value everyone in your classroom and keep them motivated. And perhaps one of the most important things is to be motivated yourself. If you don't feel motivated, if you're not enjoying the class, then there's probably quite a high chance neither are your students. And It is okay to have a lesson that goes badly, an activity that doesn't work, because this is normal and natural, and that's quite important for learners to see that mistakes happen in the adult world sometimes, hopefully not very often, but that you can cope and it's okay. It's okay to make a mistake, but next time we'll make it better. So try and be motivated yourself. Find the activities that not just your learners enjoy doing, but you enjoy doing with them too. Thank you.
Czy stoisz przed wyborem podręcznika do języka angielskiego dla klas 4-8? Chciałbyś, żeby twoi uczniowie dobrze przygotowali się do egzaminu ósmoklasisty, a tobie pomagał nowoczesny asystent lekcji? Czy w twojej grupie znajdują się uczniowie ze zróżnicowanymi potrzebami edukacyjnymi? Mamy dla ciebie rozwiązanie. Nową serię Superpowers. W nowej erze wierzymy w supermoc nowoczesnej edukacji. Dlatego mamy opinię lidera w dziedzinie edukacyjnych rozwiązań cyfrowych. Nasze innowacyjne oprogramowanie do tablic interaktywnych OneBook będzie twoim asystentem lekcji. Sukcesem nauczyciela anglisty jest sukces każdego dziecka w klasie. Nauczycielską supermocą jest edukacja wspierająca, rozumiana jako podejście w procesie kształcenia, którego celem jest zwiększenie szans edukacyjnych wszystkich uczniów. Nowa era przygotowała bogaty pakiet materiałów dla uczniów o zróżnicowanych potrzebach edukacyjnych, który jest integralną częścią kursu. Wiemy, jak ważny jest egzamin ósmoklasisty. Dlatego opracowaliśmy metodę przygotowania do niego, począwszy od klasy 4. Superpowers to seria, w skład w której wchodzą podręcznik, zeszyt ćwiczeń oraz nagrania i filmy dostępne dla ucznia na portalu doćwiczenia.pl. Każdy nauczyciel pracujący w szkole podstawowej z serią Superpowers otrzymuje bezpłatnie papierową książkę nauczyciela wraz z płytami, czytelną nawigacją i odpowiedziami do zadań z podręcznika i zeszytu ćwiczeń, przewodnik specjalne potrzeby edukacyjne ze wskazówkami i ćwiczeniami do lekcji zawierającymi alternatywne wersje ćwiczeń. Publikacja dostępna jest online. Bank pomysłów z materiałami do kopiowania dla uczniów na różnych poziomach i o różnych potrzebach edukacyjnych. Publikacja ta wspiera nauczyciela w wyrównywaniu potrzeb jego klasy. Najnowocześniejsze na rynku oprogramowanie do tablic interaktywnych OneBook, twój asystent lekcji. Dostęp do przedmiotowej diagnozy z nową erą. Dostęp do portalu dlanauczyciela.pl, zawierającego bogatą bazę wartościowych pomocy dydaktycznych wspierających codzienną pracę w szkole. Generator testów z gotowymi ćwiczeniami do kartkówek i testów oraz możliwością tworzenia własnych zadań. Oraz kanał YouTube do pracy z filmami w klasie i w domu. Praca z podręcznikiem zapewni ci możliwość dostosowania tempa pracy do swoich uczniów dzięki unikatowemu rozdziałowi Closer. Możesz też pracować z grupami o zróżnicowanym poziomie, dzięki podziałowi na słownictwo podstawowe i rozszerzone. W 7. klasie w każdej lekcji znajdziesz ćwiczenia w formacie egzaminacyjnym. Podręcznik będzie też stanowił pomoc w najtrudniejszych dla ucznia dziedzinach – gramatyce i pisaniu, dzięki dodatkowym sekcjom Grammar Bank i Writing Bank. W zeszycie ćwiczeń twoi uczniowie znajdą bogactwo różnorodnych zadań, pozwalające na swobodne przećwiczenie wszystkich zagadnień językowych w szkole i w domu. Dodatkowa sekcja ćwiczeń gramatycznych i nauki pisania pozwala na utrwalenie najtrudniejszych dla uczniów zagadnień i umiejętności językowych. A w 7. klasie dodatkowo sekcja Writing, Grammar Bank i Open Tasks, pozwalające na dodatkowe ćwiczenie najtrudniejszych dla uczniów umiejętności i typów zadań. Praca z książką nauczyciela to oszczędność czasu przy planowaniu lekcji, dzięki bardzo czytelnej nawigacji. Wygoda i łatwy dostęp do podręcznika i zeszytu ćwiczeń, transkrypcji nagrań oraz klucze odpowiedzi. Wsparcie uczniów ze zróżnicowanymi potrzebami edukacyjnymi, dzięki dostępowi do przewodnika specjalne potrzeby edukacyjne. Dostęp do nagrań na płytach i pod kodami QR. Bank pomysłów to 120 stron do kopiowania z dodatkowymi zadaniami do każdego rozdziału. 2 rodzaje kart pracy: Support dla uczniów potrzebujących dodatkowych ćwiczeń oraz Masters dla uczniów zdolnych. Po 16 kart pracy z ćwiczeniami leksykalnymi, gramatycznymi, na doskonalenie umiejętności słuchania i mówienia, na szlifowanie rozumienia tekstów pisanych oraz 16 kart pracy z treningiem tworzenia wypowiedzi pisemnych. Przewodnik Specjalne potrzeby edukacyjne to publikacja w wersji cyfrowej. Znajdziesz w niej ponad 260 stron materiałów dla ucznia i nauczyciela, wskazówki do każdej lekcji z podręcznika, pokazującej, jak pracować z uczniami ze specjalnymi potrzebami edukacyjnymi, zmodyfikowane zadania z książki ucznia i zeszytu ćwiczeń w formie dostosowanej do potrzeb uczniów, prezentacje słownictwa i zagadnień gramatycznych w zmodyfikowanej formie graficznej, dostosowanej do potrzeb dyslektyków. Na zajęciach angielskiego doskonale sprawdzi się OneBook, Twój asystent lekcji, oprogramowanie do tablic multimedialnych zawierające cały podręcznik, zeszyt ćwiczeń i liczne materiały dodatkowe. Dzięki niemu pokażesz swoim uczniom blisko 400 interaktywnych ćwiczeń. Utworzysz oddzielne wersje oprogramowania dla każdej klasy, w której uczysz, a praktyczne wskazówki pozwolą Ci sprawnie pracować z tą aplikacją. Znajdziesz tu też zadania, które Twoi uczniowie mogą wykonywać na smartfonie. Już dziś pobierz bezpłatne, w pełni funkcjonalne demo aplikacji ze strony www.nowaera.pl/OneBook i przekonaj się, jak pomocne jest to narzędzie. Superpowers to też podręcznik z repetytorium do zrealizowania w ciągu 1 roku szkolnego. W każdym rozdziale zestawiliśmy ze sobą 2 tematy egzaminacyjne, trudniejszy z łatwiejszym, a na czas po egzaminie przygotowaliśmy utrwalenie wcześniej wprowadzonego materiału za pomocą gier, projektów i tego typu aktywności. Superpowers to aż 25 filmów. Filmy Super Grammar przedstawiają struktury gramatyczne z komentarzem w języku polskim. Zostały one opracowane w atrakcyjny sposób, co sprawi, że uczniowie chętniej będą samodzielnie powtarzać materiał. Dzięki naturalnemu przedstawieniu języka funkcjonalnego w filmach z serii Super Vlog, uczniowie chętniej będą brali aktywny udział w zajęciach. Mamy też dla Was 4 filmy kulturowe z kolorowymi kartami pracy w zeszycie ćwiczeń. Brzmi imponująco. Generator testów i sprawdzianów to wygodna i przyjazna aplikacja do tworzenia materiałów sprawdzających wiedzę. Zawiera setki aktualizowanych zadań, w tym typu egzaminacyjnego, które ułatwią systematyczną kontrolę postępów uczniów. Pozwala skrócić czas potrzebny na przygotowanie testów i sprawdzianów. Stanowi niezbędne narzędzie w pracy nauczyciela. Testy możesz edytować, modyfikować i tworzyć własne zadania. Teraz testowanie jest dużo łatwiejsze. System diagnoz nowej ery to zestaw stale udoskonalanych narzędzi diagnostycznych dla nauczycieli, służący do cyklicznych i miarodajnych badań postępów uczniów, monitorowania poziomu realizacji podstawy programowej i przeprowadzania próbnych egzaminów. Seria Superpowers to seria, która zainspiruje Twoich uczniów do nauki, a Tobie ułatwi pracę i oszczędzi czas. Już dziś wejdź na www.nowaera.pl/superpowers i www.nowaera.pl/OneBook i przekonaj się, że Superpowers to seria, którą pokochasz Ty i Twoi uczniowie.